Hatak ishbinna stishlachigi okchaya ho.
Tøskana dawoy. Tamakani mi kutkud.
Det o tlaukuna dasi nel.
In both World War I and World War II, American Indian soldiers used their own tribal languages to devise and send coded messages that were never deciphered by enemy forces. Their words literally became weapons of war, spoken in the language of victory. The first time a Native American language was used to send coded military messages was apparently in 1918, at a time when the United States and its allies were clearly losing the war. Until that time, German forces had successfully intercepted every coded command and prevented every maneuver or attack devised by Allied forces. It was then that, spontaneously, a group of Choctaw soldiers presented the idea of using their so-called obsolete language as a code. Having exhausted every other means of conveying coded information, military commanders felt it was worth trying. The first use of this system came in October of that year, when a delicate withdrawal of American infantrymen was ordered. When the movement was completed without mishap or injury, Army Command knew it was onto something. The Army's field commander reported, "Within 24 hours after the Choctaw language was pressed into service, the tide of the battle turned." A total of 5 tribal languages were successfully used this way during the remainder of the First World War. When America became involved in World War II, it was an easy decision to once again call upon Native American soldiers to bring their native tongues to battle. The Army Signal Corps enlisted a small group of Comanches from Oklahoma to develop and use a coded version of their language for the war in Europe. A large contingent of Navajo recruits were selected by the Marines to become code talkers for the war against Japan in the Pacific. And American Indian soldiers from at least 25 other tribes used their tribal languages as unofficial wartime codes as well.
Represent the Choctaw tribe, World War II combat veteran, Mr. Slips Billy.
In 1992, a rare gathering of World War II code talkers from 3 tribes took place during an honor powwow held near Oklahoma City. There, Choctaw, Comanche, and Navajo code talkers shared their wartime experiences and explained how they used their tribal languages to talk the talk that defeated America's enemies.
I knew as I read current events, newspaper accounts, that we were preparing for a conflict, but didn't know where. And I was at the right age, and more or less curiosity led me to go into service. That picture of the platoon that I was in was taken at Fort Sill, September 16, 1940, when I was taken. I was a squad leader. To start out with, we had around 17 Choctaws. Some of them were transferred to headquarters. Some were sent as runners between companies, sending messages. You know, this individual would send messages to the next unit or something. And that's how we survive, is just using our language, because we had it at hand. We didn't go no classrooms and study, because we just talk to one another like we did back home. So we had this little 536 radios. I went to school with it for that too, so I had knowledge of how to use that. And on a flat country, you go maybe a mile or two with it, but it served the purpose. And we knew that the Germans were good at breaking codes and tying in onto your lines and things like that. So that was the fastest and easiest, and we had the language. All right, artillery. You're talking about large caliber weapons. When speaking of artillery, you want a certain amount of concentration. You'd say Tanapo Hochito. For instance, you were sent on a combat mission. In other words, you want to bring in a prisoner, but the only way you know how is to cripple him and carry him in, try to get the information from this enemy. You can relate it this way. Hatak ishbinna stishlachigi okchaya. Bring him back alive. Don't kill him. The awards that I received, most everybody that's been in combat has injuries caused by the enemy that sheds blood. Well, you start out with the Purple Heart. This is the first medal that I received being shot through the foot. We were advancing on a retreating enemy, and I was shot through the foot, and we had this sulfur medicine. All we do is just kind of clean it up a little bit and put that sulfur to it and tape it up and go. I mean, it throbbed a little bit, but we kept it going here. And that's your Purple Heart. This is a Silver Star Medal, and this is the third highest American government gives to the soldiers that fought against the enemy. On the back side here is an inscription. It says, "For gallantry in action." And this goes on your lapel of your uniform, dress uniform. It's Choctaw language. Tanap Nanakia Alteha. Ready in peace or war. That's what this is.
At this time, I'd like Mr. Schlitz Billy from the Choctaw Nation to come forward and share with us a few words this evening.
Indian medicine.
There's a beautiful cedar box presented by Mr. Thomas Chidley.
Box and all?
Box and all the medicine.
Made my day.
It's got eagle feather, it's got sweet grass, Indian perfume, and sage.
Indeed, thank
And
you.
we're proud of you. You're our heroes.
Thank you.
There was a man that came around and talked to several of us for the purpose of joining the Army to be code talkers. And we went in around, this is December 40 when he was recruiting us. And then we got sworn in, I got sworn in January 1, 1941. And we went from there to Fort Benning, Georgia, took our training. We started out with 17. And the time we entered the war, there was only 13 of us left. And after basic training, then they started us on the different types of communications, how to operate, tear down, and repair, like telephone, radio. A lot of military terms, there's no Comanche word for them. So we had to sit down and figure out a name for each. Just for instance, like guns, we just have one name for a gun, and that's Tawoy. You get in the military, you got all types of guns. You got your artillery, small arms, you got your machine guns, different caliber of machine guns, and we had to work out a word for each one of those different types of weapons. Same way with airplanes. We had to identify airplanes. We had a word for airplane, but we didn't have no word for a bomber or fighter or transport. We had to get together and come up with a name that everybody could understand and would relate to what we're talking about. Just for instance, bomber. We have words for airplane, but a bomber, there's no such word for a bomber. So we got together and kicked it around, and we come up with the word in Comanche is no'op, which means pregnant. You know, those bombers carried those big bombs under them like they had big bellies, like a pregnant woman, and that's what we called a bomber. Just for instance, I'm with the regiment, and we're getting a lot of machine gun fire, so I have to call back and relate the message to the artillery, pinpoint it on the map for them. I'll be speaking Comanche. I said, "What's that? Tuskana dawoy, tamakanimi kutkud." I'm saying this machine gun is really giving us heck. It's really shooting us. The artillery, we'll have a man over there who speaks the same language. I tell him, and then he relates it to the guns.
In my younger days, I went to the Fort Sill Indian School at Lawton. And they had, if we talk Indian, they would punish us. But we would get around and talk to each other in Indian, and when we see them coming, we'll hush up. Not only at Fort Sill, there was other schools. As far as warriors, they always tell me the Comanches were Lord of the Plains from around Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas, and a little bit up to Colorado. And I've heard a lot of good things. When they asked us to do what we did, we gladly did, and we probably would do it again if they asked us. You have to talk Comanche fluently, and then the other one listened to it, and he could write it down in English, and that way the Germans could listen all day, and it's never been written.
After the first combat engagement, Guadalcanal, that's down there in the Solomon Islands, the enemy were deciphering many of their important messages that they were sending. So they knew what the next move was going to be by these Marines. So they sent word back to Marine Corps headquarters in Washington. So the Commandant, we understand, gave an order to go ahead and recruit, instead of a regular 60 men, that's a platoon, just recruit about 30 and run them through the boot training and see what they can do on making up this code. So that's how I came on. May 1942, they put us on the Greyhound bus and head out to San Diego. 30 of us. Somewhere, maybe in Phoenix, one of the 30th one jump off. So when we got to San Diego, there were only 29 of us. They taught us all phases of communications, telephone, how to lay telephone wire, pole climb, all that, and radio, how to transmit by voice, how to transmit by Morse code. So they taught us all that. But during all that time, we spent some hours trying to make up the code. We get together and we went through the alphabet first. So then after we finished it, of course, they ran us through what they call field exercise right there. That was about October 1942. They sent 2 guys from this 29 back to the reservation to recruit some more. All kinds of stories came about since this was unclassified in 1968 or 69. That we even had bodyguards, which isn't true. We were just another jarhead out there, you know. We did mess duty, we did guard duty, just about anything that fellow Marines did.
We didn't have a term for hand grenade, so we developed that and called it potato. And when we were talking about the planes, in our code, we'd be talking about the birds. And if we were talking about the ships, we'd be talking about the fishes. Ako aje chitenil inde hoto le kappa cheta to tago khaltla ya I ado len le de beslo chito inlo ako ide hoto chitesil inde. I said we were using the term the iron fish when we were using torpedoes to for a landing or for destroyer services to bombard the coastal. See, it was a code, but it was the language and then the code, so that even if you spoke Navajo, you couldn't decipher the language, the coded language. The Japanese found out that they had a Navajo who was a prisoner of war, and he was a Navajo. They found that out. And they did everything to him to try to have him decode our messages. And the only thing that he got out of it was that the men were having eggs, and the only thing that he could arrive at it was the pilots were having breakfast.
One of the goals of the organization is to pay tribute to those people who have made great contributions throughout their lifetime. We wanted to honor the Navajo, Comanche, and Choctaw Code Talkers because of the significant roles they played during World War I and World War II. This is probably one of the few times that the Code Talkers from these different tribes have been able to be together. We've heard very positive comments from each of the three groups that are represented, simply from being able to meet some of the other people that they've heard quite a bit about. I think paying tribute to these people is long overdue. They did play quite a significant role in shaping American history, and the United States government was slow in recognizing the contributions that they made. But Indian people were very quick to recognize the contributions that these three groups made.
In the year 2000, Congress passed the first legislation to honor Code Talkers when the 420 Navajo Code Talkers were awarded gold and silver congressional medals. Then, in 2008, Congress passed the Code Talker Recognition Act to acknowledge the other tribes whose languages had also been used as codes, and to acknowledge the dedication and valor of Native American Code Talkers, as well as to honor the incomparable contribution they made to our nation's freedom. Originally, 19 tribes were named for this long overdue recognition, but as time passed, more tribes and individuals were identified to receive medals. Finally, in November 2013, congressional medals were presented by Congress and the U.S. Mint to 25 tribes for the heroic actions of their tribal members who had used their native languages in World War I and World War II as military codes. A proud nation finally said thank you to these deserving men. As we think about these Code Talkers and their unique contribution to America's history, we might wonder what would have been lost if these tribal languages had died, if tenacious native peoples hadn't struggled to preserve and pass on their spoken words. And who knows, American Indian people may be called upon again to defend our nation and use their words in the language of victory.
Let's sing some Indian song here.
Yeah.
That's number one hit.
Yeah.